Exciting to be here at the Prime Forum. My name is Ole Hansen. I represent the UN Global Compact here in the forum. I'm part of the global leadership team, chief of global operations. So that most importantly means overseeing our collaboration with the 68 local networks that we have in the Global Compact around the world. And we're proud to, of course, have Prime as part of the UN Global Compact family. We have an exciting panel today where we're going to talk about business and business schools, specifically how Prime and the UN Global Compact can explore collective action towards the SDGs. We're having this conversation in what is, of course, very challenging times for everyone. We knew already before COVID-19, the pandemic hit the world, that we were not on track to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. There are hundreds of millions of people still living in extreme poverty, a gender gap that still will take hundreds of years to get to overcome at the current pace. Climate change, as everyone knows, we're obviously heading for 3 or 4 degrees increase in temperature and not the 1.5 that the world has agreed to go for. And then, of course, the recent events has reminded us that apart from gender equality, there are many other types of equality, and specifically lots of systemic and widespread racism still prevalent in societies around the world. I don't know, Ranjan, while you fix the camera, maybe you mute your microphone, if that's possible. There's some noise coming. But anyway, so very challenging times, but also exciting times within the UN Global Compact and Prime. We, as Dan mentioned, Dan Thomas in the previous session, just finished our Global Compact Leader Summit and had more than 20,000 participants registered for that. We have basically a new era of the UN Global Compact starting today with new leadership of Sandra Ojiampo. And of course, Prime is also undergoing some changes with a new head, with a new board, and not least with a new strategy, where I've noticed with great joy that one of the elements is also about strengthening collaboration with business and with the Global Compact. That's not a new idea. We have also, from the time that I've been in the Global Compact, had some successful attempts as really strengthening or building collaboration between the Global Compact and Prime. We've had some events, where organized between kind of the leading communities, Global Compact Lead as it's called, and the Prime champions. We had a Global Compact board program where we had a couple of business schools very closely involved and really leading a lot of the content development. We very recently had, in the US, for example, Arizona State University or the Thunderbird School of Management being very involved in running one of the Global Compact programs in the US. And for example, also in India, and I hope we can hear about that today, we have an example of a very strong collaboration between the Prime chapter and the Global Compact local network. So this type of collaboration is not a new idea. We've, I guess, at least shown that there is potential, but I personally believe the potential is so much greater than what we've done in the past. And I hope we, in this session, can talk about some of those concrete ideas for what can be done, why it needs to be done, and really how we get started. So to discuss this, as I said, we have a great panel. We have Belinda Gibbons, who's from Sydney Business School, University of Wollongong. I hope I say that correctly. But who is also, importantly for this conversation, the coordinator for the Australia and New Zealand Prime chapter, and also, I believe, newly, part of the old advisory committee of Prime, and also part of the new board. I hope I got all of that right. Then we have, Victoria Gonzalez Gutierrez, who is professor researcher at the School of Administration and Business of CITES University, and also a leader in PRIME, specifically the chair of the chapter of Latin America and the Caribbean. Then we have also involved in PRIME, hopefully soon to join us again, Ranjan Banerjee, who's the Dean of the SPJIMR Institute of Management and Research, and who is the the chair of the PRIME chapter I talked about before, the PRIME chapter in India, and he's also a member of the new PRIME board. And then finally, but definitely not least here, Nkiruka, my dear colleague, who is also representing the UN Global Compact, who's our regional manager for Africa, who's also leading one of our exciting new initiatives called the Young SDG Innovators, and who brings to this conversation lots of both experience but also ideas, both from the YSIP program, as it's called, but also from Africa and really from working with networks of the Global Compact around the world. So just checking. So I guess we still are missing Ranjan. Hopefully he will join us soon again. But I guess I'd love to hear, as you know, part of the introduction from each of the panelists. Well, first of all, feel free to add to the introduction of yourselves and how you come into this conversation. But then I would love to hear from you why, assuming it is the case, why do you think it is important for business schools and business to work more closely together? And what do you think why do you think a collaboration between PRIME and the UN Global Compact can add something to this? Hopefully later in the conversation, we'll get to some more specific, concrete ideas that you have. But maybe for now, talk a little bit about the why and also the background you have, any examples you have experienced. Can we start with you, Victoria, please?
Thank you. Distinguished panelists, it is an honor for me to share with you this session. Good morning, everybody, and hola from Mexico. Is it important to mention our PRIME chapter in Latin America and the Caribbean was born on the initiative of a group of women and men committed to create a more equal society where there is knowledge implementation of appropriation of sustainable development goals, which the business school or country promote in their students and graduate programs and training with a comprehensive knowledge to implement the objectives of sustainable development their students practices and then develop them in the field of work and within civil society bodies seeking economic growth, social inclusion, and environment sustainability. For our chapter, it's very important to implement a broad collaboration to achieve greater impact at the regional level, which we have done very successfully through regional research projects and social projections where research, students, companies, the social sector, government sector, and other organizations are involved, as well as the different universities of all regions or our chapter. Presented a regional research project that was the first Latin American study on anti-bribery business practices involved professionals for 11 universities and 7 countries. We are developing joint research with professors from universities from Ecuador, Mexico, Peru. The central topic is multitasking behavior in the classroom and academic performance in university students. We have connections between the PRIME chapters and the different network process and environments that allow the exchange of effective learning experience. A good example of connection was between Colombia and Brazil, which developed the system of indicators of university social responsibility. There are also the responsible supply network that we have between the Global Compact and the University of the Externado of Colombia. The chapter members are writing a book that aims to address successful teaching practices to implement the use of the SDGs in the process. We are constantly developing regional meetings that serve as a connecting point between chapter members. We are constantly to achieve the connection of prime and local networks. It can only be done through collaboration, the development, and joint works between chapters. We are currently working on Prime Book 2020 at the invitation of Dr. Mette Mersin. In the chapter, we have a high degree of commitment to the development and implementation of research processes. There is cross-link with the business environment that help us understand that needs to properly meet social and environmental responsibility. We have an open channel to promote dialogue and debate between teachers, students, the business sector, the different sectors of society, government, and other groups that have interest in topics related to global social responsibility and sustainability. This has helped us as network to learn from each other through sharing learning experience and joint projects. This just a summary of the great work that has been done in the chapter for many years. We will continue to move on thanks to the compromise of all of these members as they are committed, very hardworking, and above all, passionate about making our chapter an example of excellence. That's all. Thank you. Oh,
the technology it was on my end.
okay.
Using this platform for 26 hours the day before yesterday, so I should be able to work it by now. I'm sorry. But thank you so much for that opening, Victoria. Thank you, Ranjan, for joining us now. So we'll get to you in a second. I did introduce you before in your absence, but I'll get to you in a second. I'll turn it to you, Belinda. I guess with the same idea of some opening remarks, what experience have you had, and where do you see the biggest potential, maybe for Prime, Global Compact, for business schools and business?
Great, thanks, Ali. I'd just like to say good morning and good afternoon and good evening, wherever you're joining from around the world. It's 1 a.m. in Australia at the moment, so it's nice and late or early, one or the other. But I would actually, before I start, I would like to acknowledge that the beautiful land on which I am presenting today is Aboriginal land. And as we come together to share knowledge, may we always remember the knowledge is held forever within the traditional custodianship of country. I think it's important at the moment. Mother Earth is speaking very loudly this year, and we need to start listening and learning new ways. And I pay respects to elders of the past and future, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal friends watching this evening. I recognise the racial injustices present in our society, and my chapter and I express our commitment to be better. Through responsible management education, we have to transform our way of thinking so that the next generation of leaders, decision makers, and researchers are better in this space. And we will do that only with collaborating, and collaborations with the United Nations Global Compact is crucial to this. Business accounts for about 1 in every 5 degrees globally. So in Australia, over 100,000 Management and Commerce degrees were awarded in 2018, undergraduate and postgraduate, and a large percentage of these were awarded to international students. So our universities have a profound impact on the values and mindset of graduates that are entering industry, both locally and internationally. We have learned over the past couple of days at the UNGC Virtual Summit that human rights and labour standards are least focused on they're the least focused areas within the United Nations Global Compact principles. And so I think this is evidenced in Australia for our SDGs index, which is at critical levels for gender equality, for reducing inequalities, and especially for climate action. So thinking around these speaks for our mental models, how they're formed very early in education, and I think it's essential that the Sustainable Development Goals are embedded in our curriculum, and we have practical application and experiential experience provided so that graduates can enter industry with their feet firmly, planted and ready to go. In Australia, we have a good relationship with the United Nations Global Compact local arm, but it could be a lot stronger. Our current work integrated learning programs that we have with business are quite siloed within our institutions, and a little bit traditional in how we operate that, and that needs to be transformed and bring businesses that demonstrate a commitment to the SDGs and the UNGC together with our students for the benefit of both parties. So we have a really active chapter in Australia and New Zealand. Amidst our vast land and distances between our schools, we have over 85% of our universities are prime signatories, and 4 of them are in the Times Higher Education Top 10 Impact Rankings. So we currently learn a lot about each other's activities through the Primetime blog and sharing information, our information reports, but we have a lot to share, and we need to find different ways to share that amongst the UNGC members, our businesses, and our colleagues.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much for that introduction and for already sharing some insights also into what you're looking at in terms of combating racism. I'm happy you bring that out. I think it's something also in the Global Compact we're obviously looking even more at now, both for our own organization, but also in terms of how we can challenge and support our companies all around the world to really take this much more seriously. So maybe that's in itself a very short-term opportunity for business schools and companies and the Compact to work together. So we'll get back to more ideas also from your end, but Ranjan, I wanted to put it over to you now. I hope we can hear you, we can definitely see you. Introduced you before. I also mentioned how in India there seems to be, at least that's what I'm hearing from the Global Compact side of things, that there is a strong collaboration between the Prime chapter, your Prime chapter, and Kamal and the local network there from the Global Compact. So maybe one of the things that'd be great to hear from you is what those experiences can bring to the rest of our communities, but also anything else in terms of where you see the potential for stronger collaboration.
So I think if you look at India,
I think maybe you're muted now.
Can you hear me now?
I still have no sound on you.
Is that better? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now? Okay. So
go ahead.
Yeah, PRME is an association of the business, largely has the business. Global Compact has the corporate, a lot of association of the business schools. And I'd like to compliment Kamal Singh because I think there has been very good networking between the two at the events. What we need to do in India, I think, is twofold. One is that, the first thing we did when we became chair of UNPRME in India was that the business schools don't talk to each other about their own best practices. So just getting the business schools to come together and talk about what they're doing and then have dialogue between the business schools, which I think are supposed to bring research and translate research to corporates, and have corporates and academics coming together on the same forum to discuss issues. I think this can happen very well if we have a partnership between Global Compact and PRME, where PRME looks at more academic, the partnership between the business schools, dissemination of best practice. Then we create some research, then we take that research to the corporates, and that is where a partnership between PRME and Global Compact can play a very large role. So that I think is one clear issue. I think the second learning for me is this, that we do not do enough to share best practices among business schools. And I think that is a very, very clear opportunity, that get groups of business schools, talk to each other, share best practices. The third is use the corporates to identify research opportunities and challenges, use the academics to research those opportunities and take it back. I think the relationship is very symbiotic, and where the leadership is aligned, there is a lot that we can do. I just like to weigh in on one more thing, and that is more from my business school point of view. You know, we are talking a lot about values and value education. My belief is that by the time the business school gets a student, you can strengthen their values, you cannot create their values. So business schools must recruit for attitudes and values and strengthen attitudes and values. And there are two components there. One component is curricular, and we always tend to focus on the curricular. But I think the second element is, if you are not demonstrating sustainability in the way you run your school, then I think the students are more likely to follow what they see than what you say. As a very simple example, in our school, there was a group of students who campaigned to make the institute plastic bottle free. They applied design thinking to the problem. They made a presentation to the faculty body. And today we have no plastic bottles on campus, but it was done by students. So I think that's the second dimension. How do you demonstrate sustainability in the way you run your schools? So that's just as initial comments.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. So our last panelist, Nkiruka, you have also concrete and very recent experience, I believe, from working with prime schools. So maybe you can speak from your experiences also to where you see some of the potential. Over to you.
I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes.
It's great. Thank you so much, Ole, and thank you, Ranjan. I think you actually touched upon a lot of the points that I was planning to make, but I think it's great because it only, I think, reinforces the fact that already there's this alignment of thinking in terms of where we can do better when we think about collaboration. And also thank you to Belinda, who I think we've lost momentarily as well, for raising the really important point about anti-Indigenous racism and Indigenous people's rights, which I think is very important. I'm talking to you from South Africa, and actually yesterday was a very poignant and meaningful day for us here in the country, because it was the 44-year anniversary of the Soweto uprising, which kicked off the really the crux of the anti-apartheid movement here in South Africa. So it's very important, I think, to think about the fact that we're having so many relevant conversations about anti-racism, anti-Black racism, recognizing that racism is very much a global issue and brings in other marginalized groups as well. But it's a constant struggle and definitely something that we're continuing to fight even today, despite the fact that 44 years ago, there was such a huge momentous push for anti-racism policies. And I think that connects to a lot of what has already been raised by some of the other speakers when we talk about mindset shift and the role that universities can play in that. And that's definitely where we see a lot of potential for collaboration and also existing collaboration between our local networks and our prime schools where they do work together, because that is such a huge role that academia can play in terms of being able to shape the next generation of business leaders. As Ranjan said, strengthening attitudes and values, it seems almost by the time they get into the workplace and they're out of business school, it's almost too late. You've missed a huge window of opportunity to be able to really come in and set or enhance some of the existing value systems that they have. So I think absolutely that's one key area that we can collaborate and work together, because so much of trying to shift and change business behavior and affect corporate behavior change that we do in the Global Compact, that we do in the local networks, first, it's really about shifting mindsets before you can institute new policies, new business models, new forms of providing profit-making mechanisms. It's all about having the right mindset for sustainability, and absolutely the business school arena is such a huge player and influencer in that. And also, just to my second point, in terms of the collaboration for business schools in Africa, since I want to make sure I fill the regional gap here from all of the other speakers, is that I would say one unique thing for Africa is that we have, I would say, a desperate need for more data on the continent. This is one of the key challenges and barriers that we face when it comes to achieving the SDGs, but also bringing others on board, including the private sector, including civil society, even academia, when it comes to achieving the SDGs, is really the lack of data, the lack of uniform data. So that's really another key area where the business schools really can play a huge role, in that their ability to amass data, their research capacity and capabilities is a huge benefit for local networks, a huge benefit for the UN Global Compact, and business to be able to understand, share, pool resources as well as data sets from different business schools, different countries that are doing work around sustainability, which can hopefully then lead to the development of more evidence-based tools and resources that can really specifically pinpoint what the needs are on the ground for business, both incoming business leaders, but also existing executives and leaders in business that are being able to more properly and substantively address a lot of the key sustainable development issues in Africa. So that's definitely one key area I would love to see more collaboration. And I think we've already made some forays, definitely in the Africa region, and I think in other countries where I can provide more examples of where we really can work effectively with some business schools to be able to collect useful data that in turn can be used to provide more effective and meaningful engagement for business around sustainable development.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Nkiru, and also for building on the great points made by other speakers. I think, of course, what both you and Ranjan speaks to is really the great promise of Prime from the very beginning, right? And I wanted to just bring up also something that was launched 2 days ago as part of our Leaders Summit, namely a new kind of piece of research done together with Russell Reynolds, one of the great the global recruitment firms, talking about kind of leadership for the decade of action and how you really need a whole new type of leader running forward-looking, future-oriented businesses. So I think that core role of Prime and business schools is more important than ever. We have so little time and there's so much to be done. I'd love to do a round where each of you maybe can talk about a couple of very concrete things that you would like to suggest that we try and focus on. I mean, the title of this session is really Collective Action between Prime and the Global Compact. So if you have certain concrete ideas, specific things we can do, also bearing in mind really how big the challenges are, how significant a role the companies are playing, both in terms of their current negative impact across many of the sustainable challenges, but of course also thinking about the solutions that they can bring to the table, and combining that with all that you know, of course, about the great assets and value of business schools. There is one question from the chat that I wanted to bring into this that I think you can try and reflect on at the same time. It says, well, we're talking about two different things, or two things at least. One is institutional level collaboration between Prime and the Global Compact. And the second is between Prime signatories, the business schools, and the UN Global Compact, the individual compact members, the businesses. So if you can reflect on which of the two are most important, or as I would probably think about it, how can that institutional collaboration lead also to more collaboration between business schools and businesses? But I'd love your thoughts on that, and then I'd love a couple of concrete ideas for how we can take this stronger collaboration, collective action forward. So Victoria, I'll go back to you, please.
Thank you. A good example, in Colombia and Brazil, they carried out connection activities through the prime working tables. This is a good connection point that first define the parameters and scope of the management and sustainability within educational institutions. Then it helps in choosing the level of the report that is to be carried out according to the advance and institutions' interests. And finally, match it with the most recognized indicators and management and reporting system. There is a responsible supply network that we have between the Global Compact and the University of the Externado of Colombia. The central objective of the responsible supply network is based on community composed of enterprise, civil, social organizations, state entities, multilateral agencies, and academic institutions interested in promote inclusive and sustainable development in Colombia.
I can't hear you, Ole. Can't hear you.
I was just saying thank you, Victoria, for that. Exactly, being very concrete with that example. Wonderful. So Belinda, great we have you back, and thanks for staying up so late to join this panel, or getting up so early. I don't know which it is. But would love to hear also from you a couple of or one or two additional ideas you may have. And yeah, please.
Yeah. Thanks, Ollie. I think for me, I guess each United Nations Global Compact local network has specific focus areas. So in Australia, it's very much around climate action, corruption and bribery, and racial inequalities. And so I feel that as a prime chapter, some of the actions that we could take, and this is just, I guess, in our area, I can see that we can look at the priorities of each other and start to see where those synergies can occur between those priorities. And I think too, I mentioned before, that practical experience with our students, and obviously all business schools work with a lot of different industries, and our students go there and for that practical experience. But we do need to collaborate with the UNGC local areas on that more, and work together on where our students are going, and have business students and businesses forums, and so be more collaborative and be seen as true partners, moving forward. At the end of the day, we're creating the students, that hopefully will make these changes in the world. So we want, the UNGC to be introduced to them and to start to get to know them, so that they moving into organizations, that aligning with these principles is just a natural norm for our students. So we need to start reinforcing that.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful point. I think that's probably one that has been overlooked a bit in the history of collaboration between the Compact and Prime so far. Also the connection to students and really helping bridge students into responsible business, but also from the perspective of business, really, where there's so much emphasis on not just talents, but also the ideas and the innovation, the passion, the engagement that comes from students on sustainability. I think there's a lot of potential for collaboration with business schools, also from that student angle. Ranjan, over to you for other ideas you may have, or perspectives also on where the biggest potential is. Is it institutional, or is it between individual business schools and companies, or both?
So I have, so thank you very much. Before I speak, I want to apologize to the panel and the audience for the technology glitches. I think I disrupted the first 10 minutes of the panel. I also wanted to mention collaboration, because it was my spouse, my better half, and my younger son who got the technology back up and working. So the importance of collaboration even within the family is important. Okay, I am going to suggest a very specific thing that some schools in India are doing, but I think we can elaborate on this. Essentially, in India, as part of corporate social responsibility, corporates work with NGOs. Many of the business schools, before they have students do corporate projects, are making them do social sector projects with the NGOs. If we can identify a set of 50 NGOs which are working on SDGs, and if we can have corporates and business school students partner to improve the productivity and processes of these NGOs, I think that can be a sustainable direction. And I believe one sustainable direction is it's not enough to say business schools and corporates. It is business schools, corporates, and the non-profit organizations working at the grassroots. If we can get these three together in a meaningful way, and if PRME and UN Global Compact can come together to make this happen, I would see that as a very sustainable long-term direction. It will aid student learning. It will involve values, because I believe the way students learn values is largely not by being taught it in a classroom, but by doing things which make them think differently about day-to-day issues. So that would be my,
yeah, great. Wonderful. Also wanted to acknowledge a comment here. We have one of our networks, the US network, also online. Adam is joining, and indeed I mentioned that collaboration that you're referring to, Adam, also in the chat. And I would say based on that, I mean, it is very clear that the 68 local networks that we have, we hear a lot from them really very often about their appetite for collaborating more with Prime chapters. So I would also want to send a strong encouragement to you as chapters and to other those involved with other chapters maybe listening in, that I think there's a lot that can be done quite immediately by just making the connection locally, learning from each other, but also, as you said, Belinda, figuring out where the priorities overlap and get started. But indeed, if you do kind of miss the relevant contact for some of the networks, I mean, you can always reach out to us at the Global Compact team, Nkiruka or I, and we can help facilitate a connection. So there is something to build on already, and I'm loving the ideas coming here. Nkiruka, other ideas or perspectives from you in terms of what we can do more?
Yeah, there's a lot that's already been said, so I don't want to repeat it. I would think institutional collaboration is absolutely necessary. I mean, I think individual collaboration between prime schools and local networks is great and is happening, but I think at a more strategic and cohesive at a regional level, institutional collaboration is definitely needed. One, again, going back to this idea of a lack of data and research, to be able to have regional research centers where we're able to share and collate, compare, and analyze the data and research that we're collecting from different schools and different local networks around sustainable business practices and trends regionally, I think would be very powerful. At the Global Compact, we're also now more effectively spreading our global footprint, not only through our local networks, but through our regional hubs. So I think that's a great opportunity and very concrete opportunity for us to be able to do so. Definitely for the Africa region, we would absolutely love to see an Africa chapter for Prime. We currently don't have one. There's one for the Middle East and North Africa, but not one currently for Sub-Saharan Africa. So I think that's one concrete action that we could definitely take and aim for. And I know I've talked to a few people from Gibbs, and I see Jill in the audience. I want to just wave and give her a shout out because we've talked about this quite passionately. So I think that's something we would definitely love to see. And then just picking up on your previous point, Ole, about specific opportunities, we already talked about the US network and Thunderbird collaboration, which has been going great for our Young SDG Innovators program. And we actually have 3 other local networks that are in the Innovators program, Brazil, Ukraine, and South Africa, that are working very closely with the Prime champions and Prime signatories that are in those countries to deliver that program. And it's been hugely beneficial because they bring the expertise and mentorship of their professors. They also bring a lot of research and other work that they're doing around business innovation for the SDGs. So that's just sort of one opportunity because we're running that program in 16 countries around the world. But I would definitely just love to put out to any Prime champions and Prime signatories that are in those countries, because I think there's a huge alignment because it is a program for young professionals And obviously, there's a lot of young professionals or soon to be young professionals in business schools currently. And then I think just finally, when it comes to additional opportunities for collaboration, I would love to also see more engagement with students. I think there's a lot of great thinking and ideas. I think also when we think about, and I probably don't need to say this to all of you in the audience, but when we think about students, obviously that range in terms of age and experience is quite vast these days. We're not just talking about 22-year-olds or 23-year-olds, but there are people that are in continuing education, executive education. So I think there's a lot more that we can do to really engage the students when it comes to providing mentorship, providing best practices, being advocates on their own, whether within the younger student base or within local networks, to be able to really put forward and champion a lot of these ideas of sustainability from their own learned experiences. So.
Yeah. Well, wonderful, Nkiruka. So we're unfortunately running out of time. We have like 2-3 minutes before we need to close and I guess leave the stage for another panel. So I'll give everyone just a half a minute or a minute, and I guess feel free to add to anything that has been said. But also I was wondering otherwise, if you could mention what is one big challenge that you see that we need to break down for this to happen? I guess, why hasn't it happened before? Do you see any major challenge that we need to work on also before all of this can flow? That's just one idea for what you can talk about, but feel free to add anything else as kind of this kind of close round. So Victoria, please, back to you.
Okay, thank you. Miriam's challenge in the implementation of PRIME in the Latin America and the Caribbean, promote the dialogue and adoption of PRIME to United Nations Global Pact in the business school, government, business, public sector, and civil society institutions in Latin America and the Caribbean. Reflect on the responsibility of business school with a quality education with a short and medium vision to lead process and internationally globalization and openness to social, political, and economic diversity. Is all.
Much. Belinda, last couple of words from you.
Yeah, I would just probably have to say we probably also need to recognize that a lot of the local global compact networks are quite small. They're doing such amazing things with a handful of people. And especially in Australia and New Zealand, we are such a vast, a large area. And so we really need to purposely work to collaborate together, and also for the local network of UNGC to recognise, academia is a significant sector in the market, and I don't think sometimes we're seen as a corporation, but we are a very corporate beast, and we are seeing that at the moment. So they're my last words. Thank you.
Great. Ranjan?
So, there are too many, but, one of the things I will say is that many of our forums, when we talk to business, it is the same progressive 100 companies that we talk to. So I think the companies that most need to be at our forums are not at our forums. It is the companies who are already doing things that come and talk in UN Global Plan Compact and UN PRME. There are a large number of companies which have not gone beyond short-term profit maximization. And I think this larger idea that business must have a social purpose, and profit is like oxygen. You need oxygen to breathe, but you do not live to breathe. That idea, I think, must percolate to a second set of businesses, and we must go beyond the top 100 visible companies who are already doing some of the. Really taking this down to more and more businesses is the action challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, we have, I guess, what is it, 11,000 companies in the compact now, but obviously not everyone equally engaged, committed, actionable on this, and so many others that are still not in the compact. So I would love that there was also a role for Prime and business schools in really driving sustainability among the many other companies. Nkiruka, you get the last few seconds before we have to close.
All right, well, I think a lot of great points were made. So I would say, and I think I just saw somebody steal it from me in the chat, but partnerships is really key. And I think so often when we're looking for partners or looking for support, we tend to always look outside instead of looking right in our own home. And that's what Prime is, UN Global Compact and Prime. You know, we're sister initiatives, we're in the same family. And so I think it's really important to also reorient our local networks, at least on the UNGC side, to start looking within Prime first when thinking about partners of first choice for engaging new initiatives or launching new programs for business.
Yeah, exactly. Wonderful. I think that speaks to, I mean, the exciting moment that we're in. I hope this session can really be a new beginning for collaboration between Prime and the Compact. As I said initially, we're about to develop the next strategy for the Compact, likely a 2025 strategy, and I really hope we can find ways, like you've done in Prime, to build collaboration with Prime more strongly into the next strategy also for the Compact. So thanks to these wonderful panelists, and thank you so much for those who joined, and I wish you a great rest of the Prime Forum. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Hmm.